Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We discuss 6 questions in 9 minutes because leaders know how to be concise. Let's go ahead and get started with our guest today. Our first question, in a few sentences, tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Jenny Thompson. I'm the founder and CEO of SafetyPIN Technologies, where we've developed a digital trust badge that people can use in the gig and sharing economies.
Oh, fantastic. Question number 2, what's the best thing about working with a team?
The best thing about working with a team is surrounding yourself with people who are really good at the things that you are really bad at, and making sure that they have your back and you have theirs.
I like that. That's a great response, because that is a very key component of a team. Is you're much better together than you are separate. So I like that. Thanks for sharing that. Question number 3, I hear from other leaders of teams that it can be a challenge to get team members engaged. Tell us your thoughts.
I always look for people who are not looking for a paycheck. If the reason somebody's part of your team is because of that every 2 weeks deposit in their bank account, they're not going to be focused on the same things that you're focused on. So I really look for people who have the I care about what we're doing attitude. One oddly interesting thing I always do, I make whatever product I'm selling or promoting, if my employees want it, they have to pay for it. And I have this theory that if they don't like it enough to pay for it, we shouldn't be selling it to anybody, and they don't care enough about what we're building. And so I think making sure that people are there for the right reason becomes the thing that keeps them engaged. And then obviously there are things you can do with incentives and team building that add on to that. I will say, and I know this is supposed to be a quicker answer, one of my main focuses is do not confuse culture with decor. If your culture can't survive in an office with broken chairs and a sawhorse desk, you don't have culture. You have a decorator.
I love that. That is such an important insight. I'm really glad that you shared that, because you're absolutely right. I could not agree more. There is so much more to culture than just how the office looks. I love that.
And a foosball table, like we have kombucha, we have a foosball table. Like, we're not going to promote you, we're not going to pay you fairly, but you can play here anytime you want, or we're not going to respect your ideas. So yeah, I'm very focused on don't confuse decor and culture.
Love that. Great concept. Question number 4, what other piece of advice do you have for leaders of teams?
Probably the 2 pieces of advice that I give that are a little bit unique is 1, fire often, fire fast, and fire decisively. And I think people don't fire enough, and it impacts the team so badly when there's somebody underperforming, even if it's somebody that they like. And the other thing is, I have a rule that you don't get to embarrass people in public and apologize in private. I think a lot of leaders will tell somebody their idea doesn't work, or they'll raise their voice in a meeting, and then they'll send a private email. And if you embarrass somebody publicly, you owe them a public apology. And I think it's an important sign of leadership to admit when you're wrong, and also that you just owe it to that person.
I really like that. I really like that. I won't share a story. I could, but I had a leader do that very thing, where they chewed somebody out and then came back later in that same meeting and said, I need to apologize, that I shouldn't have done that. But that is such a great example of leadership. I appreciate you sharing that. Question number 5, what other successful leaders of teams would you like to recognize that have had a positive influence in your life?
The first one was my dad. My dad was a manager at a very young age, when people were not managers at a young age. And he's one of the important lessons he taught me was about, once you decide to fire somebody, you have to do it right away. When you drag it on, it's terrible for the employee, the company, and the team. And he also taught me a lot about how to lead and how to manage, how to make decisions. So he's been a huge influence. And then in the larger ether, John Maxwell is the leadership advice that I follow the most. And he was really pivotal in me understanding that I wasn't performing as a good leader for my team. I always use the analogy that I was driving the bus. There was one person sitting next to me, and everybody else, I had blacked out the windows, and I wasn't letting them know where we were going and sharing enough direction. And reading his books really taught me what I owed to my team. So he's been a huge influence on my leadership style and my decision making.
Great. Thank you for recognizing both of those individuals. You obviously learned a lot from your dad and from John Maxwell, as many people have.
And they couldn't be much more different as people, actually. So,
But what a great example of how we can learn from any kind of a style or perspective. That's a great example. Well, last question. Tell us about your first job.
well, my very first job, I was a bailiff, and I worked in the courtroom. It's an interesting model because the leadership model is very different there. You have judges, attorneys, police officers, obviously prosecutors. And so one of the things I learned there was really much more about character and how to talk to people and how to assess when people are telling you the truth or not on every side. So even though it was an unusual step in a career path, it's been a really valuable one, understanding the people outside of the office setting.
You're a first. I've never had a bailiff on as far as their first job. So that's fascinating. I always appreciate hearing from the guests on what they learned from that first job. So thank you for adding those little pieces of insight as well as far as what you learned. Jenny, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. How can people find you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn profile is Jenny Thompson SafetyPIN. And if you want to learn more about the company, you can go to getasafetypin.com.
Great, thank you. This is Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. For more ideas, you can go to teamengagementpodcast.com and download our engagement booster tip sheet. Again, that is teamengagementpodcast.com. Thanks so much for joining us today, and have a great day.